All right, so we are diving into something pretty interesting today. You guys sent us this review from Tom's Guide for the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie.
Oh, yeah, I saw this one come through.
And, it really got us thinking about the expectations surrounding this one. Is this the kind of shot in the arm that the MCU needs, or is this more of just a fun, kind of like a victory lap for the fans?
Yeah, it is interesting too because of how the reviewer kind of set up his experience with this movie. He got to see like the first 35 minutes, like a special preview thing.
Oh, wow.
And he initially was like, wow, this could be like the best Marvel movie in years, you know?
Wow.
And then you kind of see that like contrast with how he felt after seeing the whole thing.
Yeah, and of course, this is the pairing everybody's been waiting for, right? We got Ryan Reynolds back as Deadpool. We got Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. This was like the dream team.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate Marvel team up that like we've all been waiting for, I think.
Absolutely. So it's really interesting, even just reading this review, you get that same kind of like initial buzz.
Yeah.
But then, as you said, once the reviewer saw the whole thing,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah.
He still calls it a very good Deadpool movie.
Right.
And I think that distinction is really important as we try to figure out, where this fits into the bigger picture of the MCU.
Yeah.
So I guess to start, what really stood out to you about that difference between that initial excitement and then kind of where he landed after the full film?
Yeah, I mean, those first 35 minutes must have really been something special, right? To elicit that kind of reaction, like,
Right.
best Marvel movie in years. You have to assume that, like, they really nailed the core of, like, what a Deadpool movie is. Maybe it was the pacing was really tight or the focus was very specific, and then maybe when he saw the whole thing, it just couldn't maintain that same energy or something else came in and kind of, like, diluted that initial impact.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, like, did they try to do too much after such a strong opening?
Yeah. It makes you wonder what changed. Was it like a tonal shift or just too many characters, too many plot points?
Right. Did they try to cram too much in?
Exactly.
Right.
So let's break it down. What actually made it a very good Deadpool movie,
Yeah.
just on its own merits? What were the highlights there, according to the review?
Well, one thing that the reviewer was really clear about was that Ryan Reynolds just is Deadpool.
Yeah.
He just completely embodies that character.
That's what we want to hear.
And I think that's a huge part of the appeal, right?
Oh, yeah.
And beyond that, it seems like it really delivered what you expect from a Deadpool film, right? Like the over-the-top humor, the graphic violence, that kind of anarchic spirit that the character is known for.
Right.
The reviewer even said that it was the most fun he's had watching a Marvel project in a while.
Yeah.
He put it up there with, the Loki season 2 finale and Werewolf by Night, which were both well received. So,
I mean, that's good company, right?
yeah. So if you're a fan of that Deadpool formula, it sounds like you're going to be very happy with this movie.
That's great news for Deadpool fans. But then we get to this big question mark, and that's the fan service.
Right.
The reviewer says straight up, it's like fan service. The movie.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us, and why does it seem like that was kind of like the driving force here?
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about like why this pairing of Deadpool and Wolverine is such a big deal in the first place, right?
Yeah.
You've got years of comic book history. These two characters have such a rich dynamic. And then you have Hugh Jackman. He's been Wolverine for so long.
Like he defined that character for a lot of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So bringing them together, it's inherently going to be fan service.
Right.
And the review kind of emphasizes that the movie really leans into that classic buddy cop dynamic, but with these two characters who are just constantly trying to like one up each other and just rip each other to shreds. It sounds like it embraces its comic book nature,
Yeah.
even to the point of like poking fun at the MCU itself.
A little meta.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because it is now part of that universe, right?
It is funny how that all kind of came full circle there.
Right.
So speaking of fan service, we got to talk about these cameos. It sounds like they just packed in like every familiar face they could find, not just from the MCU, but even from the older Marvel films.
Yeah, it sounds like a who's who of Marvel characters.
Yeah, so what was the reaction to that? I mean, you would think that's what people want, right?
Yeah, the reviewer specifically mentioned that during the preview screening, the audience was like cheering and applauding when these characters showed up.
I mean, yeah, I would probably cheer too.
Right. It's that instant gratification of like seeing these familiar faces.
Totally.
It's kind of like they compared it to Spider-Man No Way Home,
Oh, yeah.
and how everyone just went crazy for like the return of those characters.
Right, but in that one, it felt like everyone coming back was universally beloved.
Right, exactly. And in this case, it's like maybe some of these characters are going to hit harder with certain fans.
All right, some deep cuts.
Yeah, but it's like the movie is very intentionally trying to like hit that nostalgia button, you know?
Absolutely. So it sounds like with all this emphasis on the fan service,
Mm.
the actual story might have gotten lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
The reviewer mentions that there's a save the world plot, but it kind of felt secondary to everything else.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, right? Because like while all those cameos are fun, like those big moments, they give you that initial rush.
Yeah.
It's the story that really makes a movie memorable,
Mhm.
And if the plot just becomes like a framework for jokes and cameos,
Right.
it can feel kind of empty,
You walk out and you're like, wait, what happened? That
Exactly. And even if they're talking about like saving the world, if we don't really care about the characters or the stakes, it just kind of falls flat.
doesn't matter.
Right. And the reviewer mentioned this villain, Cassandra Nova, who just felt underutilized
Oh, wow.
and that there wasn't really like a sense of urgency, even though the premise was, pretty high stakes.
Right.
So, yeah, it makes you wonder if the story suffered because of all the attention given to those other elements.
And it makes you wonder about the rewatch value, too.
Absolutely.
Like you see it the first time, you get those surprises, and then it's like, what's left?
Right, exactly. Once you know who's showing up and all the jokes,
Mhm.
it might not have that same impact the second time around.
So unlike, a film where you've got these really well-developed characters or like a really intricate plot that you want to go back and unpack,
Yeah.
this might be one where it's like, all right, I saw it, I got my fan service fix, and I'm good.
Yeah, it's like a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, and that kind of limits its potential to be like a true classic, right?
Exactly. It might not have that staying power.
Yeah, so the review also points out that there were some inconsistencies with the more technical aspects, like the action sequences and CGI.
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
Well, it's interesting because even for a Deadpool movie,
Yeah.
which we expect to be kind of over the top and chaotic,
Sure.
the reviewer still felt like this one was a bit all over the place at times.
Oh, wow.
Specifically with the action, like he said some of it was well choreographed, but then other parts were just like really shaky cam, and super quick cuts
Uh-oh.
that were hard to follow.
Right, I hate when they do that.
Yeah, and with the CGI, he said it was an improvement over some recent MCU films like Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania.
That's a low bar.
Yeah, but it still wasn't perfect, which is kind of a recurring issue for these big budget movies. You think they would have figured that out by now?
You would think they would have cracked the code on that one by now.
Yeah, but apparently not.
So putting it all together with the final verdict is Deadpool and Wolverine, the MCU savior.
Well, I think the reviewer ultimately lands in a pretty balanced place. He acknowledges that it's probably going to be a really fun movie for a lot of people.
Okay.
Especially, that first time you see it, and he predicts that it's going to be a huge commercial success.
Right.
But he also seems to be kind of like trying to manage expectations a little bit. Like he keeps saying things like, yeah, this is not a bad movie, but also this is not like, a groundbreaking film. He even mentions this idea of redemption for the MCU. But his final assessment is that while this film is going to satisfy a lot of Marvel fans and, blockbuster fans and comic book fans, it's probably not going to be like that game-changing event that some people were hoping for.
Right.
He even says explicitly, this is not the next Infinity War.
Okay, so it sounds like it's going to be a wild ride,
Yeah.
Lots of fun moments designed to make fans happy.
Absolutely.
But maybe not that deep,
Yeah.
Narratively speaking, and maybe not the most consistently well-made film. And it sounds like what he's suggesting is that, yeah, this is going to be a crowd pleaser,
Yeah.
but don't necessarily see it as a sign that the MCU is like completely back on track,
Right.
And just as a reminder, it hits theaters July 26, 2024.
Yeah, and he mentioned it was already out in the UK when he saw it, so.
Yeah. Some people are already out there seeing it.
Yeah, lucky them.
Yeah. So it really seems like the core tension here is this trade-off between, delivering all that fan service
Right.
and potentially losing out on a more, robust and just well-executed story.
Yeah. Are you going for those like big flashy moments, or are you going for like a more satisfying story in the long run,
Exactly. So for those of you listening, it really makes you think, what are you looking for in a superhero movie?
Yeah.
Are you there for the big spectacle and the cameos and all that fun stuff?
Yeah.
Even if the plot is a little thin?
Right.
Or do you need a really tight narrative, consistently good filmmaking, across the board to really be happy?
Right.
It's a good question to ask yourself, I think.
And I think it's a question that the MCU as a whole needs to ask,
Oh, interesting.
Like in this world where it's all about interconnected universes and fan expectations, is leaning into fan service and nostalgia.
Right.
Is that really the best way to keep people engaged?
Yeah.
Or did they need to refocus on just telling good stories,
Right.
and making sure that the quality is consistent across the board, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep people coming back.
Absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
good thing to think about, as these cinematic universes continue to evolve. It's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that is our deep dive on Deadpool and Wolverine. We want to know what you think.
Yeah.
Let us know. Are you excited for this one? Is it a must-see, or are you a little hesitant after hearing this review?
Yeah, let us know.
All right. Until next time, this has been The Deep Dive.